One.
All right, welcome back again to the Paisan Sports podcast presented by Elevation 5280 Sports. Dante DePlacido joined as always by Zach Deal. And speaking of what's the deal, I've got to ask, what's the deal with the Giants? They played terrible all season. They are in line for the first round pick. They just need to lose two more games. And Drew Lock decides to turn into prime Tom Brady. And now they're currently looking at the fourth pick in the draft instead, which would basically take them out of contention for Shador Sanders and Cam Ward or Travis Hunter. What's going on with them?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I was going to criticize you for doing the Giants once again for maybe the fifth or sixth time of the 17
But it makes
weeks NFL
sense. It
season.
makes
Yeah,
sense
but
to
that's
keep
that's
calling
where
out the
you didn't let me
Giants.
finish yet. Is where this is actually justified now because I thought the same thing. I was actually rooting for the Colts even more because Joe Flacco was starting at quarterback. My dad coached him in high school, so I'm always rooting for him. And I put some money on them, thinking that they were going to be just an absolute lock. And like, what sense does it make for the Giants to even compete in a game like this? It's almost like there's a lot of teams that are in that realm, but some teams couldn't even avoid it because they were playing against teams that are in the same draft position as them. So, but this was clear as day. But at the end of the day, when everybody just thinks from the outside that the front office is going to go down to the players and tell them like, yeah, I want you to lose this game so that we can have a better draft position. I really don't think that it goes down like that. And I think the players have
Oh
more
no.
pride and they're playing for contracts too. They're not just playing for what the team is because some of those players aren't going to be on the team next year. There's
Yeah,
certain
Drew
players that
Lock is competing to be a starting quarterback in this league.
and the funny thing is, like with all the reclamation projects around the league that have worked out with quarterbacks like Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, someone put up the top of the 2018 draft that everybody used to clown for Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield being up there, Saquon going number 2, and then now when you look at it, 1 through 7, it's absolutely loaded at the top with the production that teams are getting out of them. But yeah, I just thought it's funny because like a guy like Malik Neighbors needs a new quarterback, but he also wants to go for 190 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns in that game. But I was happy about it because I got a huge fantasy performance and I had him in both of my leagues. And I had T. Higgins who went absolutely berserk. So I benched
Hmm.
T. Higgins and I had T. Higgins and Malik Neighbors in both of them in both of my championship team, and I'm up by 35 right now. But one of the leagues I didn't start T. Higgins because I had Jamar Chase, so I didn't feel comfortable going with the 2 stack. But it is what it is. But we're not talking fantasy football. We're talking about the Giants. That really doesn't make too much sense. You threw Travis Hunter out there. I don't think it would be if I'm a team, I'd seriously consider Travis Hunter selecting him, even if I need a quarterback, just because he's such a versatile, good player. I'm not expecting him to play both ways in the pros, but if he can give me one side of the ball the way that he's shown flashes in college of what he's able to do on either side of that ball and maybe mix in on the other side of the ball as well, I think that's enough to justify him by far being the best player in this draft. The quarterbacks are good. I'm not really I don't know if you watched the bowl game with Colorado, but there's been so many big moments that I felt like Shador Sanders has just let let me down in a way of what I expect to see from him in a big game versus like a ranked team. So I'm not too sold on him. I think Cam Ward would be the guy if I'm a team and I need a quarterback at the top of the draft. But also, I'm pretty sure most mock drafts have like Shador as like the number one or Cam Ward as the number one quarterback, and they have them ranked as like the 12th or 13th ranked overall prospect. So this might be a draft where people are reaching at the top, but with all the success that rookie quarterbacks have had this year and teams being in playoff positions with rookie quarterbacks, it might even be another run on quarterbacks at the top. But at the end of the day, I don't know. The Giants, I think they're going to target a quarterback. They obviously got rid of Daniel Jones. They don't really have any other direction on the roster. They need to fill out the roster with talent. So, but I think they're not going to be able to win anything unless they get a quarterback, especially in this division where you had Dak get his big contract. You have Jalen at the peak of his powers, and you have Jaden Daniels, obviously probably the rookie of the year this year.
Yeah. I think I think if you're the New York Giants, having a top 3 pick is very important. I feel like, they need a QB, or they need. I think Travis Hunter is really good to the point where, let's say they end up with the 3rd pick and the first 2 picks are Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think it's worth it to take Travis Hunter over one of the other QBs in the class. But if they walk away with neither of the 3, that's just very unfortunate for them.
I
But
there's some other prospects that I like a lot that I think are going to be extremely impactful players. It's just for the Giants specific situation. There's a couple teams in the league that just need to accumulate talent, but where they need to start at is quarterback. And obviously, that's like the foundation that you want to build for your team when you're building a team that you want to be a contender. But there's other ways that you can build a roster and then maybe get lucky where you can cross over and get like a guy like Sam Darnold having such a great year for you, like with the Vikings when they thought they were going to transition to a rookie quarterback in that situation like that. But there's other teams like the Raiders and the Giants where they have to take a quarterback and just start from there and see if they can actually get stuff building and going and build some momentum for the future. So
the only
I'm not
thing
really
that
high, like I
worries
said.
me, sorry, I was going to say the only thing that worries me about Cam Ward is he plays behind, well, one hell of an offensive line. I mean, he's able to just stay back in that pocket, calm, cool, and collected without even really, like, you watch him back there. He's not even like worried about any pressure coming his way. You take him and you put him behind the Giants offensive line, and it's going to be a big learning curve for him. So that's the one thing that worries me about Cam Ward. But I did just think it was funny how, like in term going back on, the Giants winning that game, like obviously the players are going to go out there and play their hardest. You can't really fault them for winning. That's what they go out to do. But I just think it's so funny that, of course, just suddenly Drew Lock turns into prime Tom Brady just out of absolutely nowhere. The only time we ever saw him play that well was when he faced the Eagles last year when he was the quarterback for the Seahawks. And then he went back to being trash. He was trash all year round this year. Well, not all year round. It was during his duration as the starter for the Giants. And then yesterday, he just absolutely popped off and ruined the
Yeah,
Giants.
well, but there's just like certain
It
organizations,
was
like
just so funny.
he was stuck on the Broncos forever, and just regardless of what, the Broncos really haven't had that good of skill position players there. But Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, when they were a tandem together, obviously they're not bad. They have a lot of talent. They just can't make anything happen. So there's certain situations that you're just never going to succeed at. He didn't really get too much time in Seattle because Geno Smith had a resurgence in his career, but he's looked pretty good in those last couple starts. And I guess there was a reason why the Giants signed him, because they thought maybe there was a situation where they can compete this year and the roster could be good enough outside of the quarterback that they can maybe switch from Daniel Jones to him if they felt like they needed to do that. But obviously that situation got way out of hand. But yeah,
That roster was nowhere near being able to compete. But anyway, let's talk about a team with a roster that is good enough to compete. A roster where 2 backup quarterbacks took down the Dallas Cowboys, both of which scoring 2 touchdowns total. The Philadelphia Eagles. What a victory over the Cowboys with Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee.
yeah, it was really expected. The line was pretty heavy with a backup quarterback. I think it was like 7.5, but I still
Yeah, I
felt
was a little
very
surprised by
comfortable
that.
about it. I was just surprised just because of like the questions with not only Jalen Hurts most likely not playing for the entire week, and that was like a known thing, but also Kenny Pickett being banged up throughout the week, and then like Tanner McKay being the quarterback. But that just shows how good the Eagles roster is. And the one thing about this week that a lot of people aren't talking about with like the whole Saquon Barkley situation going over 2,000 yards is like everybody's like, oh, he's got they can't stack the box with him all the time because of the threat of the passing game, even though people have complained about it. But you have AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts threat to run the ball. But everybody complained when Jalen Hurts got hurt last week how they weren't able to run the ball at all because of the lack of threat because of the quarterback to run the ball. So I think he really shut those people up this week, and it was just an absolute performance. The passing game looked really good too. Devontae Smith, if you want to have a bounce back game, talk about a bounce back game. He had the bounce back
Yeah.
game himself. He's another guy that I benched in fantasy football playoffs, but luckily
No.
I'm winning in both of the championships. But yeah, he looked good. AJ had the touchdown too. There was a couple missed throws too that could have been even more. They could have put even more points on the board. And yeah, there's been a lot of games this year where they've had to, not had to, but they have taken their foot off the gas. So it's pretty crazy. They've coasted. And there's been like 4 or 5 games this year where they, in the second half, they really have just coasted to a victory and haven't had to expel too much energy. So with how good this team is, they're still 3.5-point favorites versus the Giants this week, even if they don't play those starters. I think. What do you think about the situation with Saquon? Would you play Saquon for 101 yards and to break the rushing record, or?
We previously discussed this on the podcast.
I feel like but we did discuss this on the podcast before, but it's an entirely different conversation now.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm getting to.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting to. So yeah, I mean, we've previously discussed it before. Would you still play Saquon in this scenario or not? And previously I said no because the bye week was all the way back at week 5. He needs some rest before the playoffs. But being in the heat of the moment, it's a whole different thing, because right now I'm thinking, hell yeah, go for the record. Screw that. Let him get the record. Let's get it. He's 103 yards away or 101 yards away, whatever it is. Just let him go out there, break the record, pull him for the second half. Hopefully he can get done the first half. I think he could get it done in the first half. He rushed for over 100 yards in the first quarter against the Commanders a week ago. So I would definitely say play him. But also, if you're going to do that, you got to play the offensive line as well. You can't put Saquon out there with a backup O-line.
Oh, 100%. I think the justification lies with Jalen Hurts being banged up, though. And do you really want Jalen Hurts not playing for a couple weeks and then going into a playoff game kind of a little bit dry and a little bit rusty? So I feel like he needs to get a little bit of tote himself just regardless. I'm not saying
he should play the first quarter or two.
But that's also something where you could play Jalen for a couple drives and then keep the starting unit out there and then transition to Kenny Pickett, get Kenny Pickett more reps, and then you kind of just you get the best of everything.
I was thinking more so, I mean, Kenny Pickett's dealing with broken ribs right now. I was thinking, put Tanner McKee in for the rest of the game after you pull Hurts. I mean, there's no reason to have a banged up Kenny Pickett out there throwing the football, hurting himself even more in a meaningless game. I get he probably needs more reps
to shoot up a little bit,
but
get a couple painkillers and get out there. But
yeah, but it's a meaningless game. The reps, in case he has to come into a game at some point, it's not worth it. And then, if Tanner McKee comes in and he looks really good, then considering Kenny Pickett's health, move Tanner McKee to QB2 for the playoffs. But
no chance. He would get absolutely lit up.
First of all, we didn't see much of Tanner McKee, but what we did see of him, he looked damn good. All right. Not only did he throw 2 touchdown passes, but the touchdown pass to AJ Brown, he did that twice. The first catch, AJ Brown didn't get both feet in, but he threw a spectacular ball on 2 consecutive throws there. I thought he looked really good. So considering Kenny Pickett's health at the moment, somebody who is going to go out there and get a lot of reps in, and who is healthy, and as long as Kenny Pickett's ribs are still bothering him, I would look at Tanner McKee as the second option at quarterback. But yeah, so I think definitely play Hurts the first quarter or two just to wear off some of the rust a bit, just so he's not going in completely cold into the playoffs. And
And
then,
we're
I'd be very
a
curious
lot
to
more
see more of
subtle of
Ken
a game
the
plan.
rest of the game. What's that?
Yeah, a lot more subtle of a game plan with Hurts too. Like we don't have to call any design quarterback runs or anything like that. Just go through the motions a little bit, throw some balls, get in to some rhythm with the offense, just build some rapport, and yeah, keep it moving. So the Eagles also a lot of people aren't talking about. Not only can Saquon get a singular record for himself, even though the offensive line and it really is a team record in my eyes. But also the Eagles and the Ravens are most likely going to do it too because they're extremely close as well. Could be the sixth and seventh teams in NFL history to rush for 3,000 yards in one season. So the Eagles are actually 3 yards away from rushing for 3,000 yards,
Oh,
and
wow. I
the
didn't even know that.
Ravens are 40 yards away from rushing for 3,000 yards, and the Ravens have done it twice of the 5 teams in NFL history, and the Eagles would be doing it for the first time in franchise history. So I actually saw
Wow.
that as well. You got to think about how good Derrick Henry and Saquon have been, and then obviously the threat of Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson back there as well, and that's accumulated to over 2,950 yards rushing for those teams. And Justice Hill and obviously Kenny Gainwell mixed in a little bit there too with some carries. But
Don't
I
forget
thought
my
that
guy,
was
Will
interesting
Shipley.
to have 2 teams in today's NFL run
Also,
like
Jalen
that.
Hurts is a huge contributor to those team rushing yards. I think he has over 400 on the season. So that's a big,
Jalen's got like 600. He's got
huh?
like
He has 600?
he's got like 600 and
Oh
at
yeah, well
least
then that's
20.
a gigantic contribution to the team rushing.
Lamar's got like 820.
Yeah,
Pretty
that
crazy.
you'd expect. That's Lamar Jackson.
But it's crazy because I had this bet in that I put in before the season. There was on FanDuel. It was like player props, like single season leaders for the season before the season started, and there was a boost on it. So I took Saquon Barkley to lead the league in rushing. But if he doesn't play one snap, which I just can't see them not playing him at all, like at least giving him some sort of chance to break this record or come close to it. I just can't see that happening. But if he doesn't break it, that bet was like what plus 1,300. So he's sitting at 2,005 yards. If Derrick Henry goes ballistic and they're playing for seeding, if Derrick Henry has like an outrageous like 220-yard game, he could actually take over the rushing title
well,
from
I
Saquon.
was actually
Crazy.
thinking about that. I was thinking about that. Not only is the
Because he's at
record
like
at stake,
1783 right now, so he needs like
he needs a little over.
225 yards
Yeah,
rushing.
yeah, because I was thinking about this. Not only is the record at stake here, but although Saquon pretty much has the rushing title all but wrapped up, it's still not completely out of the realm of possibility to lose it to Derrick Henry. I mean, Saquon
And
himself
honestly,
with
who would you put your money
255
on if you
yards
were
at
to put
one
your
point
money?
this season. Saquon needs less than that to overtake him. So it's very unlikely, but it's not impossible that if we don't
Who
play
do you
Saquon,
who would you put your money on if you were going to put your money on any player besides Saquon Barkley to like catch somebody from behind like that in rushing yards? It would be Derrick Henry.
yeah, absolutely. I'm actually curious. I wonder if that's currently a betting prop on FanDuel,
Yeah,
and then
I've been doing a lot of research on the books because I think it's crazy. So right now, Saquon, like I said before, and I tweeted it out after the game yesterday, I don't see any justification where he breaks this record and doesn't win the MVP. And we're about to have a conversation about that further on and talk about some of the other instances of 2,000-yard rushers and how they ended up in the MVP race. But I don't see an instance where he breaks the record, single season rushing record, and doesn't win MVP. And he's plus 1,800 to win the MVP right now, but he's minus 230 to break the rushing record.
he
Don't you think that's kind of crazy?
want to know want to know his odds for offensive player of the year right now? Minus 10,000 to win offensive
Yeah,
player
it's
of the year.
crazy. Well,
That's kind that's kind of wild.
if we're going to talk about some of the former the other 8 guys that rushed for 2,000 yards in NFL history and how they ended up in the MVP race, Jamal Lewis did it in 2003 and he like wasn't even in the running for MVP at all. He had like 2,066 yards. He was like third or fourth all time. And there was co-MVPs in 1997 and 2003, two of the years that there was 2,000-yard rushers. So the one year Barry Sanders, when he eclipsed 2,000 yards, he actually won co-MVP in 1997, I'm pretty sure, with Brett Favre. But when Jamal Lewis did it and there was co-MVPs in 2003, he didn't win MVP. Eric Dickerson, when he broke the record, did not win MVP because it was the same season that Dan Marino broke the single-season passing touchdown record, and it was the first time a quarterback ever threw for 5,000 yards in one season. So that's the reason why
That's
he didn't win it.
justifiable.
Yeah, so that's the reason why he didn't win it that season. Adrian Peterson obviously won it when he came 9 yards short of the record in 2012, and he's the last running back to do it. I also researched some of the running backs that won that have won MVP in recent memory. And you got like Sean Alexander and LaDainian Tomlinson, but a lot of those had to do with both of those seasons where Sean Alexander set the single season touchdown record by a player, and then LaDainian Tomlinson broke that as well. Marshall Faulk did it, and he was a dual two-way threat. So I really like Terrell Davis rushed for 2,000 yards, and he is somebody that doesn't have the craziest stats ever, but just because he didn't play for that long, but he's a two defending back-to-back Super Bowl champion, and he won MVP when he rushed for 2,000 yards. So, and all of these guys have lower yards or higher yards per carry, or lower yards per carry than Saquon Barkley. So that's what a lot of people aren't talking about. They're talking about the extra game that Saquon Barkley is going to have to break the record, but also Eric Dickerson broke O.J. Simpson's original record.
With 2 extra games. I
With
mean,
2 extra games. But the biggest thing is, to me, it's a way you can cut it down the middle and make it even for both guys and just keep, Eric Dickerson did it in less games. Saquon Barkley did it in less carries because Saquon's going to have potentially 34 carries to get 101 yards, and he's averaging 5.8 right now, so that's going to take less than 20 carries.
Plus, not only that, they likely won't play him the entire game, and it's very unlikely he gets 34 carries in one half. I think the whole one more game thing is ridiculous. For the fact that when Dickerson broke the record, the previous record had it done in 14 games. I'm sure at the time a lot of people thought, the same thing of how, Dickerson has 2 more games to do it. And then years and years of a 16-game season, suddenly there's no more records left from the 14-game seasons. And that's what's looked at as the norm, is records set in 16 games. So eventually, years down the line, it's going to be the same thing with the 17-game season.
Because what would the conversation be about, like the Patriots winning 18 straight games and losing in the Super Bowl, but the Miami Dolphins, who they were trying to catch for the 1972 team, they won 14 straight games in the regular season and then won how many playoff games in a row? So essentially that Patriots team won more games in a row than the Dolphins did. They just didn't win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and also to your point, Saquon's going to get done in less carries, which me personally, I think carries is the more important stat than games, because it's how many attempts you have at doing it.
There's like one, when I was trying to actually be as transparent as possible and think it through just without any bias, like it also kind of is a little bit not more impressive, but it is impressive if there's more carries and less games, like how Eric Dickerson had that many carries and less games, because he's getting the ball.
It was a whole different NFL.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying
Saquon is getting this done in a passing league.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it makes it more impressive.
I think it's actually really, really good for the league, though, because we know there's this nucleus built of the young quarterbacks that are extremely good, that separated themselves very early in their career. And it just seemed like those guys were the guys that were going to hold the league together. And now it seems like the league is coming back to a little bit more of traditional football and kind of like 90s football, where there is a lot of electric wide receivers that play out there and dominate, but there's also running backs that can just absolutely take over games. And Derrick Henry Henry and Saquon aren't the only two guys that have dominated at running backs, and it just has happened that all the running backs that have changed teams or have just been acquired by their team in the last year or two have been the running backs that have really been bringing back the value of the position, whether it's like draft picks like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, or guys that just were brought in from free agency or trades like Joe Mixon. So Josh
Yeah.
Jacobs.
And one guy on the Eagles I wanted to talk about today is a guy that me and you both pointed out the same thing yesterday during the game. That's CJ Gardner-Johnson. Thanks to a 2-interception game yesterday, this is now his second season as an Eagle with 6 interceptions. Not back to back.
You know, it's crazy too. I got a memory from we got to start posting reels back onto our Paisan Sports Instagram page like we used to.
Yeah.
And I got a memory yesterday during the game of a clip of us talking about from last year when they didn't have CJ Gardner-Johnson on the podcast, talking about how much they were missing his ball production.
Yeah, they certainly were. They certainly did.
Do you know
in
the
second
Eagles
half
corners
against
do
the
not have an
Commanders.
interception this year?
I actually did. Yeah, I actually
But CJ
fact-checked that
absolutely
this morning 'cause I
screwed
was thinking
Quinyon on
about
that
it.
pick. That
Yeah,
CJ
yeah,
screwed
he took
Quinyon on that
it right away from him. He took
right
it.
in his
Quinyon
Quinyon's like
had his
literally
hands
right
out
here,
like
just
this,
runs right
ready
in
to
front of him.
catch it, and Gardner-Johnson just stole the.
Yeah, that was
But
honestly
what's funny too is it's not the first time this season Quinyon Mitchell has been screwed out of an interception. It's happened a few times. It's kind of been like if this season was a TV show, like let's say Ted Lasso, like that would be a reoccurring joke throughout the show that Quinyon is like an insanely good corner who keeps getting screwed out of his first career interception.
yeah, because the difference is like Cooper doesn't really even get the opportunity to like jump. No one really throws like quick routes like into the slot that are like dangerous on him that he has an opportunity to make a play on the ball. You know what I mean? Like Darius has had some opportunity, or yeah, I know you hate Darius, big play Slay. Has had his hands on some balls too. He he's got like I think he's like 6th or 7th in the league in pass deflection. So they've been been getting their hands on balls. Quinion's up there too, and CJ's up there as well. But also these CJ picks, I think he has 4 or 5 of those picks have come in. He's got 4 picks in the last 4 games.
Yeah, 2 of them were yesterday, and I actually calculated a stat on my own about CJ Gardner-Johnson. I have it here in my text. I sent to my cousin. So here we go. So CJ Gardner-Johnson has spent 6 years in the NFL, right? 2 years on the Eagles, 4 years elsewhere between the
3 with the
and the
Saints and 1 with the
Lions.
Lions.
Yeah. Now, as an Eagle, he has 12 career interceptions. Elsewhere, he has 6.
Total, right? Yeah.
He has 6 elsewhere. So he spent double the amount of time outside of the organization, but yet he has double the amount of interceptions as an Eagle.
I would say that's like what? That's actually like 5 seasons or 5 seasons pretty much because he played like 3 or 4 games last year. And I think he had like 2 picks in like 3 or 4 games for the Lions last year. So he was making plays on the ball. It's honestly crazy that he's just like, there was controversy with him. He left the team and people thought like it wasn't that big of a difference. And like he like really, you can really point to him being like the singular thing that turned around this defense. If you want to point to like one thing of bringing a guy back, like how everybody's like talking and looking elsewhere, like the pass rush isn't good enough. When are we going to get stable linebackers that can actually stay in the mix? What the hell is going on with our secondary? More so talking about the cornerbacks and not about the safeties. And really the missing piece the entire time was not being able to negotiate a contract with CJ Gardner-Johnson when we could have just paid it. We got him on a better deal the second time around. We just had to wait a year with him off the roster, and we could have done more with him last year if he was here. But we paid less to get him back, and we paid James Bradbury. I was just thinking today, and I was looking through some stuff. I was trying to go on social media on James Bradbury's Instagram to see. I went on like the Eagles page. Like, you haven't heard a single thing. I don't think I've heard a single person mention James Bradbury's name within the organization, within sports media, within the radio, within the fan base since his injury. And
Yeah, and
I'm not worried about it. I'm not
it's
concerned
been
about
a
it. I'm actually
very
happy.
long injury, and like we haven't even gotten any updates on his injury. Usually with players that aren't even like a third or even a second stringer, but they're hurt, you still get their injury updates. But we have had no update, and this was not like a season
It's a
long
lower
injury.
it still says on ESPN that he's on injured reserve with a lower leg injury. It doesn't specify what the injury is
Yeah,
or
and
anything.
we have not gotten a single update. We haven't heard that he got surgery. Nothing.
Honestly, I'm happy for him if he can hang on the coattails and get a Super Bowl win, hopefully. I think he deserves it. He played at a really high level on the 2022 team, and he was a big part
I
of that.
think
He was
you know
really
what
close to it. So it's like
I would
I'm not against it. I don't think
I would
he's
be
never
happy with
caused
him.
issues either. It's not like he's like came out and spoken and became a cancer in the locker room and said like, I think I should be playing out here. Why are they playing 22-year-old cornerbacks over, like saying crazy stuff like that? It's never been like that. He's been accountable to what has gone on in Philly. And I think yeah.
Yeah, I would be happy for him in the sense that it was his holding penalty that lost us the game, that lost us the Super Bowl. Not that it was his fault. I think it was a bullshit penalty. But I mean, that has to have been eating at him for quite a while now. So I would be happy for him to get his ring. And he also, yeah, he is a pretty solid dude. I mean, he did not complain once when they moved him to safety, when they put him on the bench. Nothing. He's never made any arrogant statements or complained about his new role. Nothing of that matter. He seems like a pretty solid dude. He just his play
He's
diminished
just
with
been
age.
so behind the scenes. Like, he hasn't, like, he's actually one of the older players. I think he's like the second oldest player on the defense. And you don't, or the third oldest player behind Brandon Graham and Slay.
Yeah.
And you haven't heard him, you've seen him of anything of him on the sidelines. I haven't during the games, haven't heard anything. He doesn't even, I don't even think like he follows the Eagles on Instagram and he still has the Eagles pictures up, but he doesn't say that he's like an Eagles player. But there's pictures of him from training camp. It's a little, I don't know, but on the
Also though,
roster.
speaking of the refs in the Super Bowl, one thing I want to talk about. So it wasn't a bad game by the refs, but there was one really, really bad missed call in this game. And that was when Kenny Pickett was rolling out to his left and Devontae Smith was trying to get open. I think it was Eric Kendricks. He just ran up, shoved him from behind straight into the ground during an active pass play, and there was no flag called
Yeah, that was pretty
whatsoever.
crazy.
That was so egregious and atrocious. And we
I thought,
argued last week
I'm not
about
going to complain
the
about the
refs,
refs.
and I mean that's as bad of a missed call as it can possibly get, in my opinion.
I'm not going to complain about the refs, but I thought the one hit that Micah laid on Kenny Pickett was a rough in the passer as well for
I thought
today's
that looked like
standard.
a
He
clean
lowered,
hit, honestly. That was
I don't know,
very
he lowered his
quickly after
shoulder
he
and
got rid of the
drilled Kenny.
ball. Yeah, but it was like a half second after he got rid of the ball. To me that was a clean hit. I just think that missed call on Devontae Smith getting shoved to the ground was absolutely nonsense. I also think it's
Do you think
nonsense that
people?
CJ
Do you
Gardner
think people?
Johnson got fined a ton of money for his actions last week, but the guy who punched his helmet off got nothing. It's just insane. Like the way the refs have been acting towards the Eagles this season has been absolutely insane. And actually, I saw a tweet. I believe I saw this earlier today. I might have saw it yesterday. Here it is. Okay. So here it is. Because I'm not fucking crazy when I say that the refs have been absolutely horrible to the Eagles. I saw somebody post this. So it says somehow the Eagles' opponents commit the least penalties on defense and the second least on offense. And this is opponents the Eagles face, how many penalties they're committing. The probability that Eagles opponents commit penalties at this rate by random chance is approximately 0.096%, or 1 in 1,024. It's not coincidence, because the likelihood of it being a coincidence is less than 1%. I mean, the refs have been absolutely atrocious towards the Eagles this season. So you don't have to be the fan that, doesn't complain about the refs. It's plain and obvious. Like, we
Well, I
have
mean, it depends
we
what
have
you
a
focus on.
13-win
Did
team
Cooper
where we
DeJean
don't have
not
anything to complain about, but
did
it's
Cooper
the
DeJean
facts are the facts here.
did Cooper DeJean not tackle Cavante Turpin by his face mask?
The refs aren't perfect. They're going to get some calls right and wrong on both
Yeah,
sides.
exactly. So
But this
the
is the
Eagles are
grand
literally
scope. Why am I looking at this is the grand scope of the season right here.
the
This
Eagles
isn't
are
just
like the
one
are
call we
literally
can point
the
to.
Eagles.
This is the whole season.
I don't think it really makes that big of an
There's a
impact.
whole season worth of data and evidence, not one play.
Yeah, and if you look at another resource that you can use right here, the Eagles are like literally dead middle of the pack of getting penalties called on them per game. So I don't really think the
Called on
refs
them,
even
but
really
I'm
impact
talking
the
about
game.
opponents getting penalties called on themselves when facing the Eagles. And what suddenly these teams are super disciplined when they face the Eagles. It doesn't make any sense, and the data is there to back it up. The evidence is there to back it up. But
I
anyway,
just
before we turn this into another heated argument, it's time for my meatball of the week. And my meatball of the week is Micah Parsons. This felt like a pretty easy one based on his comments following the game, stating that if you take away the scoreboard, it was a very close game. And outside of the Eagles' 5 touchdowns, is basically what he said. It was a very close game. Basically saying, if you take away all the good things the Eagles did in this game, we actually played pretty well against them. Just a
there's a
bonehead
reporter.
statement.
I saw that before I got on here, and there's a reporter in the background. Like if you
Yeah,
look,
he's like
like
trying to
laughing.
contain his
He's
laughter.
like trying to
It's
hold in his
such an
laughter.
absurd
It's
statement.
just
I
so
mean,
crazy.
this has been a season full of complaining from Micah Parsons, full of absurd
Yeah, can you
statements
honestly
from Micah
can you blame him
Parsons.
though? Can you blame him?
Yeah.
I don't think that he can be blamed though. Like he's definitely annoying and he keeps talking about it. But at the end of the day, if you were him, you were as good as him. And the situation with the team, you haven't gotten paid yet. They took so long to pay CeeDee Lamb. They took so long to pay Dak Prescott. They traded Amari Cooper away when they had him for a 5th-round pick, and then now when they don't have CeeDee Lamb, they don't have any receiving options. They don't give players contracts out. They let them walk. Their team has just really disintegrated, and he doesn't really know what the future lies with him. He sees all the success his hometown team, his former college teammate, has been having, and he really thought it was, the Cowboys were going to do something special this year. The way Jerry Jones runs the team, says that he's not going to go spend money. This offseason is going to look like how last offseason went. And we already saw the hindsight of the results of how that turned out. I mean, I'll be voicing my frustration too. But for him
Well,
to
no,
say
right. Here's the thing:
those specific comments,
his comments are not on par with what you're saying. It isn't a ton of him complaining about the team and saying how great he's been doing and how bad the team has been. Another absurd comment I can
well, I don't
point
really
to
think anybody's going to do that.
from a few weeks ago, he said he was like, "Oh, look out for us," or whatever he said. He made some sort of comment implying that the Cowboys were about to go on a miracle run and make the playoffs. I forget what the exact quote was, but that's what he was saying. He also did that podcast with Slay, which at the time was very weird, and some people thought it was like a microcosm of a locker room imploding yet again. But that was very early in the season. I don't think I get everything you're saying, but I don't think the comments he's been making and the constant complaint, I don't think it's on par with that. He's acting like the Cowboys themselves are a great team And I don't know. I don't even know what point he's trying to get across, but I don't think it's that.
Well, his comments are accurate for the first 2 drives of the game for where they drove down the field,
Yeah,
had the
but
ball
that's
for a
2
long period
drives
of time,
out of the
threw
entire
an
game.
interception, then they get the ball back, go all the way down the field and tie the game. That was accurate for that point in the game. But outside of that frame of time, that was the only score that they put up in the game. So
Yeah, that was the only time they looked good, that one drive. I mean, they turned the ball over 4 times. You know, he said if you take away the Eagles' 5 big plays, what about your 4 turnovers as an offense?
yeah, maybe everybody just thinks that they can, pull off a game like Washington and you can overcome 5 turnovers and still be competitive in a game, which that was just
Not
so
when Tanner McKee's out there slinging it. You know what I'm saying? I really do hope McKee gets to play the second half against the Giants. After only
I
getting to
think
see
he's
like
I think
5
he's
attempts
guaranteed.
from him, I
I think
really
there's a
want to
good
see
chance
more
he's
out
gonna
of Tanner
play.
McKee.
I think there's a good chance he could play the majority of the game, depending on how it starts off, especially with Kenny banged up. Like you said, that's a good point. Um, I still think Kenny Pickett, when healthy, gives them the best chance. I can't trust Tanner McKee, but he did look good the other day. But I can't trust Tanner McKee. He just doesn't have enough experience, and he's not what really today's NFL is at the quarterback position because he can't move around. But, he throws an accurate ball. Throws a good ball. He had, 2 touchdown passes and less than 5 um, completions, which is pretty
Yeah, and he
crazy.
really
5,
made
not even 5
3
completions,
touchdown
5
throws.
passing attempts. They didn't really even have to do too much with him in there. And it's just good because this is how good these skill position players are. I think it even more shows that type of performance just shows how good A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Saquon Barkley are, is where you should really be able to put in anybody that has been able to make the NFL and show that they have some arm talent and can command an offense a little bit. You should just be able to go in there and still have production because of how good those guys are and what they're able to do.
Now, speaking of Tanner McKee, before we move on to the Sixers, but speaking of Tanner McKee, before I heard Micah Parsons' comment, my meatball of the week was going to be AJ Brown for just yeeting Tanner McKee's first
You did
career
what?
touchdown ball into the stands. He
What did he
yeeted
do?
that John. He yeeted that John into the stands. He,
Yeeted.
he took that thing. He freaking launched
Yeah, they
it.
might have to put him at quarterback. What was that? Threw the
I
ball like
thought that
40
was
yards
I
into
thought that was
the stands.
hysterical, and then he immediately realized what he did. He was like, "Oh." But they got
Yeah, I
that.
was actually
And
gonna
that
ask you
that
that.
fan that fan lucked out, man, to trade
I
a
was actually
Terry
gonna ask you that.
McKee ball for AJ
Would
Brown
you have
signed
given the
jersey.
ball back?
Absolutely. First of
Not
all,
with the promise, without the promise, just out of being a good
yeah,
traditional Eagles fan your whole life.
yeah,
Would you give them the ball back?
absolutely. Absolutely, I
Would you
would.
have given the ball back if that was, say, Saquon Barkley got drafted to the Eagles first over or second overall pick? Like, say, like the Eagles just drafted Saquon, like how the
Mhm.
Giants did second overall. Saquon scores a touchdown, first touchdown with the Eagles as a rookie, jumps into the ground, the ball somehow lands in your hands. Are you giving Saquon Barkley's first touchdown back
I
as an
would I
Eagle?
would I would ask what I'm getting in return. I would give it to him, but I gotta ask what I'm getting in
Because I
return.
feel like Tanner McKee, it's like if you're getting offered an AJ Brown signed jersey, or it's like Tanner McKee, who we don't know if he'll ever start a game for the Eagles under center ever. You know what I mean? It's
It
like
would
that's a
be
pretty fair trade
really
off.
funny. It would be really funny if Tanner McKee balls out against the Giants, right? Earns himself a spot as a QB2 on a bad team, right? I think that's a realistic possibility. Becomes a QB2 on a bad team. Their QB gets hurt. Tanner McKee takes over. Absolutely balls out. Goes on to become a top 5 quarterback of all time. And then you're that fan that I'm giving a
I
hypothetical. I'm
can't
not
even bring
saying this is
myself to.
why do you always do this? Just let me give a hypothetical, what I think would be a funny scenario.
The
If
reason why
Tanner
I shake my
McKee,
head like
oh,
that
stop
is
coming up. Let me finish because then we go back and forth and it takes forever. Just let me finish my hypothetical here. All right. So McKee balls out against the Giants, gets his spot as a QB2 on a bad team, eventually becomes QB1, balls out, ends up becoming one of the top 5 quarterbacks of all time. And you're the fan that gave away his first career touchdown ball for, at the time, a much more valuable AJ Brown autographed jersey. I think that would be very funny if like 20 years from now you're that fan and you're like, God fucking damn it. As like Tanner McKee lifts his 5th Lombardi trophy.
Yeah. I mean, AJ Brown at the end of the day probably is going to be a Hall of Famer. So it's like,
Oh
if it
yeah,
was
definitely.
like Jahan Dotson, if Jahan Dotson's like, yo, I got this jersey for you, bro. Like, give me that ball back. Like, I don't know, Jahan. I might have to be keeping this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, good spirits for the Eagles. We don't have to really talk too much. We'll have time next week after the game to dive into like how we feel about the playoffs and the seeding. I guess we can talk about. I don't know if you watched the game last night with Washington. What did you think of the Washington?
I caught
game?
some of it. If Younghoe Koo was not injured, the Falcons would have won that game. That was very unfortunate for the Falcons, where when you have an opportunity to kick a game-winning field goal, but it's a backup kicker and he just doesn't have the leg to make it. Younghoe Koo
That was like those
that.
camera angles that you get in baseball where they show the outfield and it looks like a guaranteed, no doubt home run, and then the ball just dies. And
Yeah, I thought that was
looked like
good.
it was
I
good
thought that
from
was good.
70. I thought that was good from 70, and then you just like, what?
Yeah,
That's short.
it was short. Yeah, if Younghoe Koo was still healthy, there's no doubt in my mind.
I don't know.
Koo
Younghoe Koo sketches me out with the stance. He has like a stance like no other kicker in
He
the
does
league.
have a funny stance for a kicker.
He
But
stands
that's the
like
thing. It's always the unorthodox kick. The kickers are like relief pitchers, where it's like the more unorthodox you are, the more dangerous you're
nah,
going to be.
his is like a whole nother animal though, bro. He like crouches down. He's already short. He crouches down and he takes like one step away from the ball where like other people are like setting up like three steps away from the ball. He's literally like crowding the ball before he kicks it. Like I'm like always worried that he's just not gonna have enough. And like if you're standing that close to the ball the way that he does, like he only has like what one step to perfect where he's kicking the ball as opposed to like getting in rhythm and stepping a couple times to complete that action. So, but Washington, as much as I, despise Washington and I don't want them to have success, and I was playing against Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and Zach Ertz in fantasy, and Zach Ertz screwed me at the end of that game, putting up like 25 back-end points out of nowhere. I have no clue how Zach Ertz is still getting open in today's NFL. Dude's got to be running.
He's been having a great season. He's actually
He's
had a
running
great
like
season.
he's so slow now though. I just don't know how he still gets open and still like gets past defensive backs, but he's doing it. So shout out to him. Jaden Daniels was really dynamic with his legs last night. I think he ran for like 130 yards rushing, set the single season rookie rushing record too. So they look like a team that could be a force to reckon with. They're playing next week. They're actually right now, I think Washington's slotted as the 6th seed, right? And the Packers are the 7th seed.
I believe so. Yeah. Does Washington, do they have anything to play for next week? Because I know they have.
Seeding
They
with the
do. I
Packers.
was hoping they would have nothing to play for because I really want Dallas to win. Like I mentioned a few weeks ago, I was rooting for Dallas to win out every game except the game against the Eagles, and they're one victory away from doing just that and finishing 8-9, which is exactly where I wanted them to finish. Currently they have the 13th pick in the draft, but if they can find a way to beat Washington, that would be very nice. That would bump them back a bit. Um, One thing that would also help make their draft pick worse is if the Bengals lose. But I'm actually rooting for the Bengals to complete a miracle run to the playoffs just because they seem to do it every year. And this year they got to the point where they were like 4-8 or something. And you're like, all right, well, this year they're not doing it, but
Did you
they
see that?
actually still have it. They still have an opportunity to get it done. It's still
You know
possible.
how
They need to
absurd that
win.
stat line? Joe Burrow actually on, I think it's DraftKings or FanDuel, is actually a higher favorite than Saquon Barkley to win MVP right now. That's how crazy his
That's
stat line.
that's
I know.
insane.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you really think about it, like if his record was like 10 or 11 wins, he's like the unanimous MVP. He has 7 straight games of 250 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. That is absurd That is
Okay,
outrageous.
really? Jesus. Yeah, that's nuts.
7 straight games of 250 and 3 passing touchdowns. Isn't that
Oh,
outrageous? And he scored a rushing touchdown the other day too. And I've had to
wow.
play him in fantasy for like 4 straight weeks because 2 of the people that I played have had him as the quarterback. But his stats are absurd right now.
Yeah, I want to look that up actually.
And they're on a
That's
4 straight winning streak. So I can read it to
yeah,
you
yeah.
too.
They're on a roll lately. Let me see. Yeah, wow. Wow, if you
And
look
look
at his stats,
and
one,
look at
two,
he
three,
had
four,
5 and
five,
4.
six,
He
seven,
had the
eight. It's
3
eight
touchdown
straight
game.
games. Yeah, yeah. And it started off with a 5 touchdown game. So he's currently at 42 touchdowns on the year. By the way, another player who, one guy who has one quarterback who's had a resurgence in the past couple years, who at times was good in his career, but when he was good in his career, he never did anything spectacular. He was able to just get done enough at the quarterback position. Never had any eye popping numbers. His best season, was in 2020, 3,500 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 95 passer rating his rookie year, which was pretty good. 3,700 yards, 27 touchdowns, 14 picks, 93 passer rating. That was kind of the extent of his abilities. And then even last year when he had
What
his
about Baker?
resurgence, he threw for 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 94 passer rating. It seemed like when he is at his best, those are the kind of numbers he's going to put up. This year is surprising me. He is more of a gunslinger this year. We're talking about 4,200 passing yards, 39 touchdowns, 15 picks, 107 passer rating, still a game to go. We'll probably hit 40 touchdowns. Yeah, I'm talking about Baker Mayfield. I mean,
And that's without Chris Godwin pretty much the whole
yeah,
year.
this is more surprising to me. What Joe Burrow is doing is very impressive, but that is more surprising to me, being that it's coming from Baker Mayfield. I'm very
I
impressed
thought I
with
thought
him.
Baker was always good. They had a short leash. The Browns the thing about the Browns was when they were like kind of showing signs of like potentially being good and they had some players around them, people thought they were going to go from like being historically bad, one of the worst franchises in NFL history, to like immediately a Super Bowl contender every single year, and things were going to change that quickly. And it never happened like that.
I've
It was
I've
just
always been a
abysmal.
big I've always been a big supporter of Baker Mayfield, but even I didn't think he would be able to put up numbers like this, like 40 plus touchdowns, which he should get. Um, but yeah, I do want to see the Bengals complete
They
this
also they clinched
playoffs.
a playoff spot, or they put themselves back in the lead for the NFC South. Um, with the Washington win last night. If the Bucks lose and the Falcons win, the Falcons have beaten the Bucks. So if the Bucks and the Falcons end with the same record on the season, then the Falcons make the playoffs because they beat the Bucks twice head to head this year. But
Yeah, so the Buccaneers still have a game to play for. Baker will hit 40 touchdowns.
yeah,
Um,
Mike Evans, I think, is still trying to get his like ninth or 10th straight 1,000-yard season in a row. Let's see what Mike Evans is at
well, it's
right now.
not just consecutive; it's that he's never had a season with less than 1,000 yards.
He's got 915, so 85.
Yeah, he can get it done. He can get it done because he's been getting it done lately, so he can get it done. So that's another storyline. But anyway, um, let's talk about the hottest team in the NBA. I'm gonna keep ironically slash unironically now, I guess, saying it until
They had the third
until
longest
they cool
active.
off a bit.
They had the third longest, or the third best 10-game. Um, I don't even know how
Stretch.
long. Yeah, 10-game stretch in the East right now with 7 out of 3. So they won 7 out of 10
Yeah,
games.
they've been looking good. They played a
If
really
you look at
bad
their team
Jazz
stats,
team.
though, I was looking at their team stats. They have some of the worst team stats in the league. They're at bottom 5 in every single team statistical category:
Hmm.
rebounding, scoring, field goal percentage, everything. The reason why they've been staying afloat is they only give up in today's NBA, they only give up 110 points, which is like 5th or 6th in the league. But they're a bad rebounding team. They're only rebounding just over like 40 rebounds a game. I think Joel's literally averaging less than
Which is
7 rebounds.
something It's something I talked about a lot going into the season. It was a huge part of the team that was worrying me. But
But how
um,
many games did Embiid and Drummond both
I
miss?
just threw in the butt. You don't get to cut off my butt with another butt.
But
The butt I wanted to talk about, a guy we were
whoa,
talking
whoa,
a guy
whoa.
we were talking about.
Yo,
Um,
you said the butt I want to talk about, and then you said the guy that we're talking about. Come
okay,
on, man.
okay. Anyway, a guy we were talking about last week, who is able to do a lot on the court. You highlighted his rebounding. He grabbed 8 boards against Utah in 22 minutes.
Who? Yabba dabba do?
Yabba dabba do. I'm looking at all of his games since December 4th. 4 rebounds, 3, 5, 3,
You
1,
actually might
3,
have meant
3,
that comment when you talked
7.
about.
But 7 was with 37 minutes. He just grabbed 8 boards in 22 minutes against Utah. Gershon Yabusele. He's looking pretty damn good. Embiid and Maxey look absolutely dominant right now. Maxey especially. I mean, I keep talking about Maxey each week. But he's playing lights out, man. He's playing absolutely lights out. He looks like a true star in this league, which I feel like I sound like a broken record from last week.
Yeah, no, it almost like for some reason it almost feels like it's too good to be true with Tyrese Maxey, how like big they hit on him, and I don't like expect or like want any regression from him, but at some point I always expect like when is he gonna tone it down a little bit and not be this productive, and it's just like he almost seems like he gets better every time he's out on the court. And we highlighted the last time we were talking about the Sixers last week with how good of a facilitator that he's becoming and how he's spreading the ball around and actually getting a lot of people involved, and he's taking on the onus of being the leading scorer, and he's the leading scorer on the season because Joel is still ramping up, trying to get his rhythm throughout the games. Joel has still been dominant, but he's not rebounding the ball the same way, and he's not scoring as much. He's just had a couple games that were up and down, so his averages are down just because he hasn't played too many games. But yeah, Tyrese has been this steady guy that's been keeping this thing on course, and without Paul George even really being that productive. I mean, we talked about Paul George has been like a real good gadget guy, and he's done some things for him. He's very athletic. He's made some good defensive plays. I think the Sixers are I think they have good steal numbers. I don't think their block numbers are that high, but their steal numbers are pretty good as a team, and they're pretty aggressive. And then when you have guys like Kyle Lowry and Paul George that get in the passing lanes, then that helps you get out in the fast break a little bit. And it seems like everybody's just transitioning into the role the right way. And we
Yeah.
don't expect it's not like on Christmas Day where we expect Caleb Martin to hit 7 threes every single game. It's just when we need a game like that, when other guys can't get going, then we need guys to step up. And that's what I'm waiting for Kelly Oubre to do. Because I know Kelly Oubre has it in him, and they gave him a different role at the down the stretch of last season where he was like a primary defender on the main ball handler for teams down the stretch. But I know he can still score the ball a lot. We haven't really seen it this year, but they're probably going to need him at some points in time to be a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah. And they play again tonight. This long road trip continues with a 10 o'clock game in Portland, um, followed by a game against Sacramento. After that, they have a real chance to win these 2 games and improve to 14 and 17, which, although that's still 3 games below 500, it's a huge improvement from
They're
what their
half a
record
game right now. They're
like
14
earlier in the
games
year.
out of they're 14 games out of the 1 seed. Obviously, we're not talking about the 1 seed, but the 10th seed for the play-in is 13 and a half games. So
Yeah, they're only a
they
half
have
game
less
out.
games played.
What's odd is they have so much less games
Yeah.
played than their surrounding teams. I mean, they're 12 and 17, right? As the 11 seed, the 12th seed, the Brooklyn
Well,
Nets.
they
They're
got eliminated from the NBA Cup early, so they didn't have this extra NBA Cup tournament games that some of the
Yeah,
other
but
teams.
I mean, a lot of teams, same thing. But yeah, they've played 3 less games than the Nets, who are right behind them. The Pistons, who are in front of them, they're 14 and 18, so that's 3 more games. The Bulls, same thing, 14 and 18. Pacers, 16 and 17. That's 4 more games played than the Sixers. So, yeah, I mean, the Sixers, they have not played as many games as a lot of the other teams. And I would bet half of those games have been against the New Orleans Hornets for some reason.
Yeah, it seems
But
like they play them pretty often.
yeah, I don't think they play them again for a while. They still have how long of a road trip is this? It started in Boston and then Utah. That's 2 games, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a 6-game road trip. And the first game back at home will be against Phoenix Monday, January 6th. So let me think. They're currently 12 and 17, 4 more games left on the road trip. Let's say hypothetically they go 3-1 the rest of the way on this road trip based on how well they're playing right now. That would put them at 15 and 18, right? They come back home after that. I mean, I think there'll be a good deal of hype at the Wells Fargo Center for this team that's starting to turn it around.
If you look at January, it looks like their schedule is pretty packed. In the beginning of January, they play the
Oh, yeah, it
1st, the
is.
2nd, the 4th, the 6th, the 8th, the 10th, the 12th, the 14th, 15th, 18th, 19th, 21st. I mean, they play like 10 games, it seems
Then
like
24th,
20
25th,
days.
28th, 29th, 31st. Yeah, they're
Seems like
playing
a
they're
lot of
playing
games
games.
in January. 17 games in January opposed to 12 in December.
Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah, that's
hopefully we
crazy.
can
So
keep
they got
going.
17 games in January, 11 so they had 12 in December, 17 in January, 11 in February, and then 17 in March.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's interesting scheduling, but yeah, I mean, it's just the grind of the NBA season. We got 82 games. It looks like this team's getting healthy. The thing that's changed about the health of this team is where we would get really disappointed as Sixers fans because it would seem like we kind of know what to expect on back-to-backs at Joel and Paul George. So that's actually going to be a tough stretch of games with all those games like that because the back-to-backs, if Joel and Paul George are both not going to play in back-to-backs, then there's going to be a couple games in January that they're both going to miss just automatically. But the thing that's changed about the injuries with the Sixers is where it seemed like the Joel and Paul George weren't just missing back to backs; they were also just missing regularly slated games that they were supposed to be playing with good amount of rest, whether if they were injured or whatever they were dealing with injury management. So um, that's gotten them back on track. And they got some teams. I mean, they should beat Portland tonight, even though Portland's won 2 straight. They're playing the Kings after that on New Year's Day, and the Kings just fired their head coach, that was a pretty surprising move because the Kings head coach is highly regarded. Mike Brown, the former Cavs LeBron coach from back in the day, former Golden State assistant on some of their championship teams. So he'll easily get another job in the NBA pretty quickly, but they were definitely underperforming. I think it's funny is because the Kings pulled the plug on Mike Brown, who's like seen as like a really, really good head coach and like led them to like a top 3 seeded record in the West a couple years ago. And they were 13 and 18, like sputtering, but the Sixers are 12 and 17 and in the playoff hunt. And the Kings are like 13th in the West with 13 and 8 records. So 13 and 18 records. So
Yeah, I think in today's NBA, teams are way too quick to fire coaches. I mean, look what happened in Milwaukee last season. That made absolutely zero sense. So, but yeah, I mean, hopefully, Sixers can capitalize on a Sacramento team in turmoil right now, and hopefully put together 2 more wins against Portland, and then Sacramento following that and improve to 14 and 17.
what we haven't talked about it, but it is actually coming up in a little bit. So while we have like maybe like a month and a half, not even a month and a half until the trade deadline, this team said they were going to shed some contracts on the roster, so that they can get some guys back and have some flexibility with the roster to make some moves to maybe make a playoff push, depending on what they would need. What do you think this roster actually needs right now? They actually
Rebound,
have the
rebounding. We just talked about they need rebounding.
because usually
Um,
it's in a situation to where they don't have any forwards or any perimeter players, and it seems like they have an influx of perimeter players now
they
that actually
they were very guard heavy last season. They're very guard heavy this season. Funny enough, I completely forgot Reggie Jackson was still even on the team up until the other night. But yeah, they're very guard heavy yet again this year. Their biggest weakness is rebounding. That's what they need. They need to go out there and get a true
Like a
forward who can.
4 rebounder, or like because they have 2 really good traditional centers that
Yeah,
rebound
no. I
share
mean,
the
yeah,
ball.
get a four that can rebound definitely because, like I've mentioned before, you know what you can say, oh, well, rebound. They have Embiid and Drummond. It's like they're never going to be on the court at the same time
Yeah.
together. You need two guys on the court who can rebound, or else you're just going to get absolutely out rebounded, which they have been doing. So, yeah, that's what they need at the deadline. They need rebounding, plain and simple.
Yeah, I don't really think they need ball handlers or facilitators. They got top
For
scoring
shooters,
options. They almost have too many scoring options to where like Paul George can't get going because he doesn't have the ball in his hands too much because Tyrese and Joel pretty much dominate that department, but he's also not shooting the best percentage and he's had his looks, but I wouldn't really say that. Their defense is pretty good. They're allowing 110 points a game. Maybe, I mean, it never hurts to get a 3 and D guy and a perimeter guy, but those guys are expensive. I mean, the Lakers just had to trade 3 second-round picks, D'Angelo Russell and another player for a 31-year-old 3 and D guy in
yeah,
Dorian Finney-Smith. So,
yeah.
um,
So yeah,
so that
go
was
out, get
interesting.
rebounding.
I don't know if you saw the Jimmy Butler heat over the past couple of weeks. Them going back and forth and potential breaking up. I don't see the Sixers even making a play for that because like the Paul George roster spot would pretty much come down to Jimmy Butler. I did see that potentially the Suns were talking about Jimmy Butler and Bradley Beal being traded for each other, which would be an interesting move. But that was also another thing I was going to talk about was not too many guys, even with the contracts that the Sixers have, and just like with people thinking that Paul George is having a disappointing season. All the teams that have like the guys like 3 option guys where there's 3 top options on offense, there's not that third guy in the mix that is really ultra productive. I mean, Bradley Beal was averaging 31 points a game before he got to Phoenix, and he's averaging like 15 points a game. You know what I mean? That's just like it's hard to really implement 3 guys that much in your offense and get that type of production. I mean, what? Maybe the Celtics get the most production out of that with Derek White, and he's averaging like 18 points a game. And I don't think anybody would say he's like a superstar. So I think it's actually kind of a good thing that the Sixers are winning games and playing well without having found a fully strided Paul George yet.
Yeah, I would agree there. And the most important thing is the W's. As long as they keep stacking those up and proving that they're a legitimate basketball team, which I think, the record over their last 10 games with the fact that they just beat the Celtics on Christmas Day. I think I think this team looks really good and they look like a team that can continue to win games and get into the playoffs.
What I did notice about the January scheduling, though, is they got some tough games on the horizon. They end January with the Nuggets. They got the Lakers mixed in there. They got the Cavaliers. They got the Nuggets again. They got the Bucks, the Knicks, the Magic, the Suns, and the Thunder, and the Warriors in the month of January. So we're talking about 12 games versus some of the best talent in the league.
Yeah,
But
so that's
you
the
know,
gauntlet. Let's see how they
big on
do,
big. Big on big. Just hopefully they'll be at full strength for those games and they're not you know, just
Yeah, we'll see.
without players in those situations. But thank you guys for tuning in to episode 79 of the Paisan Sports Podcast. Hopefully, we'll be celebrating Saquon Barkley breaking Eric Dickerson's single season rushing record on next week's podcast. I think the chances of us getting any updates or any news or any more stuff about the Phillies is very slim. At this point, it seems like it's a
Yeah.
pretty dry part of the season. They've already made their moves. The Sixers, they got a lot going on in the next couple of weeks, so we'll have some topics to talk about them. Hopefully, it's not injury related, or maybe it could be good injury news. But yeah, we'll be back with some topics to talk about with you guys on the next edition of the Paisan Sports Podcast. So thanks for tuning in today.